Welcome chess friends to this video about step 2 thinking ahead. The subject today is defending against the mate, and defending forces you to look from the opponent's side, and that is very important also to reduce your blunders in your games. And for defending we have the acronym PCMIC: protect, capture, move away, interpose and counterattack. And when you think about thinking ahead and those two steps, step 2 and step 3, they improve your board vision, so you don't see an island surrounded by a sea, and you don't see 4 quadrants, but you have to see the complete board. And for beginning players it's also very important that they become fluent in naming the squares. And of course there's the visualization itself, so to have a clear image of the target position, to have a clear assessment of the change dynamics in the target position, and then of course we have to calculate and evaluate. So we're going to do those exercises, and first of course we have to identify what is the mating threat, and then we have to pick which letter of PCMIC we're going to use to defend against the mate. So this is the first exercise, and the moves given are e7 and rook f5. Can you see the mate that black is threatening? So the mate that black is threatening is rook h5, checkmate. And how can white defend against rook h5 checkmate? By playing the move rook e5. So e7, rook f5, threatening mate on h5, and we have an X-ray defense by playing the move rook e5. Second exercise, bishop takes e6, rook takes e6. What is the mating threat by white? The mating threat is rook takes a6. Can we protect the pawn on a6? Yes, we can do it by playing queen b5. So we have bishop takes e6, rook takes e6, threatening mate with rook takes a6, and we can defend by playing the move rook b5. And notice that after rook c6, for instance, a move like rook b7 would fail to rook takes a6. And after rook a7, queen a7 checkmate. King d4, rook g3. What is the mating threat by black? Rook d3. How can we defend against the mating threat rook d3? By making some luft for our king with the move e5. So the king can move away after rook d3. And notice that black cannot renew the threat with f5 because the pawn on f6 is being pinned. So king d4, rook g3, threatening mate on d3. So we play e5, the pawn on f6 is pinned, and now after rook d3 we can play king e4. Queen takes d4, queen h5. What is the mating threat by white? Actually there are two, right? The first one is queen in g4, checkmate in 1. And the second one would be rook h8, king g7, followed by queen h6. So how to defend against that? Queen takes d4, queen h5. And the solution is f5. So the pawn on f5 is defending the square g4, and the queen on d4 suddenly is defending the square h8. So queen takes d4, queen h5, with the mating threat of queen g4, but after f5, the pawn on f5 is defending g4, and the queen on d4 is defending against rook h8. Next exercise, king f1, rook f8. What is the mating threat by black? King f1, rook f8. The mating threat by black is queen takes f2, or rook takes f2. How can we defend against that? Notice that rook e2 would fail to queen h1. So the way to defend against it is by playing c3, mobilizing the queen on b2 for the defense of the bishop on f2. So king f1, rook f8, threatening mate on f2 with either the queen or the rook. We play c3, and now the queen is defending, protecting the bishop on f2. Rook a3 and knight h3. What is the threat? The threat is twofold, right? Rook g1 checkmate, and knight takes f2 checkmate. So there are two mates in this position that we both have to defend. Rook h3, knight h3. How to defend? We do it with a counterattack, bishop e5 check, king moves away, and then we capture the attacker with rook takes h3. So rook a3, knight h3, with a double threat, mate on f2, because the rook is guarding the g file, and at the same time threatening mate on g1. How to defend? We play bishop e5 check, king has to move away, and then we capture the attacker, so the second letter of PC Mike. Here we have queen takes c7, queen takes d4. What is the mating threat by black? Queen takes d1 is checkmate. And at the same time the bishop on d1 is under attack. So we have like a double attack. Of course it's queen takes d1, captures the bishop. And if the bishop would move away to a square like f3, there's queen a1. So that's another threat in the position. So white has to be careful. So how to defend against queen takes d1 and do vulnerability on the back rank? By playing bishop e2, because in that case after queen a1 the bishop can interpose and play bishop f1. Right, so we have the threat of queen takes d1 checkmate. If the bishop would go to f3, queen a1 still mates. So white has to play bishop e2. So in this case the bishop can interpose. This is a difficult one. Rook f8, queen g4. So there's a lot going on. Rook f8, queen g4. Right, so the two queens are looking at each other, the two rooks are looking at each other. And what is the mating threat by white? The mating threat by white is queen takes g7. Does g6 work? No, because after g6, queen d4, king g8, queen g7 is checkmate. Can black capture one of the attackers? Well, after queen takes g4 there's rook takes f8, and after rook takes f7 there's queen takes c8. So there are many ways to defend, but so far we found 3 that fail. Can you find the right way to defend? Rook f8, queen g4. Queens are looking at each other, rooks are looking at each other. And the only way to defend is by playing rook g8, defending the pawn on g7. So rook f8, queen g4, threatening mate on g7. After g6 there's queen d4. After rook takes f7 there's queen takes c8. After queen takes g4 there's rook f8. So the only way to defend is rook g8. e5, attacking the bishop on d6. Rook h6, what is the mating threat by black? Rook h1 checkmate. Queen h1 checkmate. How to defend against that? By moving away, so king f1, which makes it possible for after queen h1 to either interpose or to go to e2. So e5, rook h6, king f1, and the king escapes and the knight can interpose. This is a difficult one. Queen takes b1, rook takes g7. What is the mating threat by black? And why this is also difficult is because there are pieces disappearing from the board. So queen takes b1, rook takes g7. The mating threat is rook h7. Can we protect the square h7? No, we cannot. Can we capture the attacker? No, we cannot. Can the king move away? King h2, rook h7, still checkmate. Can we interpose? So pick up the white queen and say the only effective way of interposing would be on this square. And then you find, of course, that the only way to effectively interpose is on h2. And now we figure out the route to that square, which is via b8, so queen b1 to b8 and then to h2 after rook h7. And what is the resulting pawn ending? Well, black cannot stop the d4 pawn, so white is still winning. So let's have a look. Queen takes b1, rook takes g7. We play queen to interpose. So let's see how it continues with this pawn ending. And we see that white promotes first and wins the endgame. Queen takes a2, queen h3. What is the mating threat by black? Queen g2 checkmate. So what is the only way to defend against that? Just like in the previous position, we think about where does the white queen have to be to successfully defend against queen g2. And we find the square f1. Can we get there with tempo? And then we find the move queen a6, queen f1. So we play check, king goes back, and then there's queen f1 defending against queen d2, queen d2 checkmate. Okay, so we have rook takes h6, rook g3. This position looks very similar to the previous one, right? In the previous exercise we could play e5 and the king escapes, but in this case that does not work. So we have to find another defense. Can we trade one of the attackers? And you can trade the attackers by playing rook g6, a forcing move, a check, and trade the rooks. And the mate is gone. So let's have a look. Right, if we would play e5, how would this continue? Pawn takes, check, king goes here, bishop d3 is checkmate. So in the previous exercise we could move away, but in this case it does not work. King g8, queen b7, where is white threatening checkmate on h7? Which black piece can defend against queen h7 checkmate? The rook is powerless, because after rook f7 there's queen takes f7, and the only way to defend the square h7 is by a backward move of the queen, queen h8. Threatening mate on h7, and queen h8 is the only way to defend. King a2, and then queen d1. What is the mating threat? The mating threat is b3. And so after king a2, queen d1, white has to play b3. Themselves, so black cannot play it. Queen takes g4, queen h6, threatening mate on g7 and h8. So we need a defense against two mates, one on h8 and one on g7. Queen takes g4, queen h6. How to defend against queen h8 and queen g7. Did you find a solution? Black plays bishop h7, interposing the queen from mating on h8, and the queen on g4 is protecting the square g7. Right, so we have a dual threat, two mates. We play bishop h7, the bishop interposes the queen from mating on h8, and the queen on g4 is protecting the square g7. Rook takes c2, knight f5. What is the mating threat? Queen takes g7, right? What can we do? Bishop takes f5, fails to rook e8 mate. Can we interpose? Yes, we can, f6. Why does that work? Because there's rook takes e6, but rook takes e6 is not a threat because of rook c1 checkmate. So knight f5, f6. And white cannot take the bishop because white has a back rank vulnerability. Queen c7 and knight e8. Queen c7, knight e8 with a double attack on g7 with the queen, and at the same time threatening knight takes c7. How can we defend against both threats? So is it possible, right? If you have a double attack, the first thing we look at is, can one of the pieces, one of the targets, defend the other target? So can the queen defend g7? And if you ask that question that explicitly, then you can find the X-ray defense queen c3. First it looks hopeless, but there is this very nice defense, queen c3. So always when you're in a double attack, the first thing to do is to figure out if you can use one of the targets to defend the other target. Last exercise, f4, rook takes g2. What is the mating threat? Rook f1 or rook g1 checkmate. How to defend against it? The king can move away by playing king b1. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. I hope you subscribe and like this video, and I hope to see you again. Thank you.